What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Thursday, March 18th. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, we have a 6-game slate tonight, so let's take a look at the point guard position. I like Chris Paul from the Phoenix Suns playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Chris Paul has averaged 36.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. He scored 40, 38, and 34 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 34, and 31 minutes. He's projected at 35.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. He's $6,900 FanDuel salary and $800 more on DraftKings. Now, he scored 40, 48, 20, 51, and 50 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves, so he would have crushed value 4 out of those 5 games. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 228.5 points scored in this game. It's a fast-paced game, a fantastic matchup, and excellent player versus team history. So I like Chris Paul here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, another point guard that I like is Ricky Rubio from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Phoenix Suns, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing point guards. And Ricky Rubio has averaged 24.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 17% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 47, 31, and 30 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 27, 29, and 32 minutes. He's projected at 25.4 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can get you about 28 fantasy points and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,400 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. He scored 24, 29, 19, and 37 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Suns. He's been playing awfully well lately. He's broke 30 fantasy points in 4 out of his last 5 games. Now, it's a tough matchup here tonight, but he's also playing more minutes, and his salary's pretty reasonable. So I like Ricky Rubio here versus the Phoenix Suns. Another point guard that I like is Lonzo Ball from the New Orleans Pelicans playing the Portland Trailblazers, who have the 7th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Lonzo Ball has averaged 31 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He scored 44, 37, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 30, and 25 minutes. He's projected at 30.3 fantasy points here tonight. Now, that's only 4.5 times value, but this is kind of just a gut call. He's played well the past couple of games. It's a good matchup, and I think he can score 35 fantasy points or more in this one and get you 5 times value or more. He's $6,700 FanDuel salary and $200 more on DraftKings. Now, he scored 44, 31, 32, 33, and 25 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Trailblazers, so that's really good player versus team history. And another reason I like this pick is because Vegas thinks there's going to be 241.5 points scored in this game, so this is a good game to stack. So I like Lonzo Ball here versus the Portland Trailblazers. Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $100 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won, and then we'll send you $100 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like Jordan Clarkson from the Utah Jazz playing the Washington Wizards, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the third most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Jordan Clarkson has averaged 27.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 29% usage rate. He scored 26, 32, and 17 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 24, and 20 minutes. He's projected at 27.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. Now, he's only $5,200 FanDuel salary, but he is $900 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price, and I think you can still go there on DraftKings because Mike Conley is out, so Jordan Clarkson should get plenty of minutes. His usage rate should be higher. I think he can score 34 fantasy points or more, get you 5 times value or more, even on DraftKings. Although he's a much better FanDuel play. But he scored 35, 34, 18, 37, and 33 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Wizards. So it's a great matchup. Excellent player versus team history. And he should get a little bit of extra usage here with Mike Conley out. So I like Jordan Clarkson here versus the Washington Wizards. Okay, I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Talen Horton-Tucker from the LA Lakers playing the Charlotte Hornets, who have the third worst defense overall, and they give up the 13th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Talen Horton-Tucker, now he's averaged 16.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 18 minutes per game with a 21% usage rate, but take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 30, 39, and 10 fantasy points, playing 26, 28, and 17 minutes. So I like his last couple of games playing 26 and 20 minutes, scoring 30 and 39 fantasy points. That is very encouraging, and he's projected at 19 fantasy points here tonight, and that's still 5.1 times value because he's only $3,700 FanDuel salary and $200 more on DraftKings. So if he's going to get around 25 minutes, 25 to 28 minutes here tonight, I think he's got a great chance at hitting or exceeding his value. So I like Talen Horton-Tucker here versus the Charlotte Hornets. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Terry Rozier from the Charlotte Hornets playing the LA Lakers, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing shooting guards. Terry Rozier has averaged 33 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 37, 35, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 27, 33, and 22 minutes. He's projected at 30.8 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can hit at least his season average of 33 fantasy points and get you 5 times value or more. He's $6,500 FanDuel salary and $100 more on DraftKings. So Vegas thinks there's going to be 226 points scored in this game. So he's got some major upside if his shot is falling. So I like Terry Rozier here versus the LA Lakers. Okay, another shooting guard that I like is Devin Booker from the Phoenix Suns playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Devin Booker has averaged 36.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 32% usage rate. He scored 37, 32, and 48 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 36, and 35 minutes. He's projected at 34.8 fantasy points here tonight, which is only 4.6 times value. But stick with me for a minute here. He's 7,500 FanDuel salary. He's 400 more on DraftKings. But take a look at his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. He scored 58, 41, 62, 26, and 29 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. So in his last 3 games, he would have got you 5 times value or more. And we know he has a 50, 60 fantasy point ceiling. So major upside in a fast-paced game, in a great matchup, good player versus team history. And I think his salary is about right. So I like Devin Booker here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I like RJ Barrett from the New York Knicks playing the Orlando Magic, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. RJ Barrett has averaged 29.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. He scored 34, 41, and 51 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 40, 35, and 36 minutes. So I love his last 3 games there, playing a ton of minutes, scoring a ton of fantasy points, and he's projected at 30.1 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.1 times value. He's 5,900 FanDuel salary and 500 more on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites. Great matchup here. So I like RJ Barrett versus the Orlando Magic. Okay, another small forward that I like. If you're looking for a decent mid-range play, I like Carmelo Anthony from the Portland Trailblazers playing the New Orleans Pelicans, who have the 8th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Carmelo Anthony has averaged 24.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 26 minutes per game with a 24% usage rate. But he scored 30, 30, and 45 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 30, 29, and 31 minutes. He's projected at 25.7 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. I think he can get you 27, 26, 27 fantasy points. That's 5 times value on both sites because he's 5,300 FanDuel salary and just 100 more on DraftKings. So the reason I like this pick, well, he's got good player versus team history. He scored 30, 17, 32, 22, and 38 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Pelicans. So he would have been exceeding his value in 3 of those 5 games. And this Vegas total of 241.5 points scored in this game, just a ton of fantasy points to go around. I think Carmelo Anthony can scoop up a bunch of those. It's a fast-paced game and a good matchup. So I like Carmelo Anthony here versus the New Orleans Pelicans.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, another small forward that I like is Brandon Ingram from the New Orleans Pelicans playing the Portland Trailblazers, who have the 7th worst defense overall. And although they've been pretty good versus opposing small forwards, Brandon Ingram has averaged 38.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 28% usage rate. He scored 38, 32, and 45 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 26, and 25 minutes. He's projected at 36.3 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can hit his season average of 38.8 and get you 5 times value or more. He's $7,800 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So I like that price on both sites. And he scored 38, 27, 26, and 44 fantasy points in his last 4 games. So he would have hit value 50% of the time. I like his chances in the game that Vegas thinks there's going to be 241.5 points. I just love to stack this game tonight. So I like Brandon Ingram here versus the Portland Trailblazers. Okay, another small forward that I like, if you're looking to save a little bit of salary with a nice mid-range play, I like Danilo Gallinari from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Okay, so he's only averaged 20.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 23 minutes per game with a 22% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 42, 31, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 34, 28, and 29 minutes. So his minutes per game are way up. His production is way up. Now, he's still only projected at 25.1 fantasy points here tonight, but he's going to be playing more minutes, so I think he can score 30 fantasy points here and get you 5 times value or more. He's $5,700 FanDuel salary and $400 more on DraftKings. So he's also scored 17, 44, 38, 36, and 34 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Thunder. So that's excellent player versus team history, fast-paced game, and a good matchup. So I like Danilo Gallinari here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, who do we have at the power forward position? I'm going to give you a value play here. I like Jay Crowder from the Phoenix Suns playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 2nd worst defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Jay Crowder has averaged 21.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 27 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. He scored 25, 13, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 28, 17, and 30 minutes. He's projected at 21.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.6 times value. He's $3,800 FanDuel salary, but he is $800 more on DraftKings. So I like that FanDuel price. Probably a FanDuel value play for me only. He scored 4, 27, 43, 28, and 33 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Timberwolves. So excellent player versus team history. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 229.5 points scored in this game. So I like Jay Crowder as a value play on FanDuel here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, another power forward that I like is John Collins from the Atlanta Hawks playing the Oklahoma City Thunder, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. John Collins has averaged 32.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He scored 49, 39, and 21 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 31, and 27 minutes. Now, he's only projected at 31.5 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can get you 36 fantasy points, get you 5 times value or more. He's $7,500 FanDuel salary, but he's $300 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. Now, John Collins has scored 37, 36, 35, 36, and 24 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Thunder. I think there is a little bit of risk to this play. Of course, there's risk with any player, but John Collins, sometimes he just puts up a dud. Although the last couple of games, he's been playing really well. And I like this matchup, fast-paced game and a high-scoring game. So I like John Collins here versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. Okay, moving on to the center position. I got a value play for you. I like Moses Brown from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and although they've been pretty good versus opposing centers, Moses Brown has averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 12 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 53, 24, and 25 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 29, 24, and 26 minutes. So his minutes are way up. They're more than doubled the last 3 games. Production is way up there. He had a monster game last game, and he's projected at 26.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 6 times value. He's $4,400 FanDuel salary and $100 less on DraftKings. So I love that price on both sites. So I like Moses Brown here versus the Atlanta Hawks. Okay, another center that I like, especially on DraftKings where he's always underpriced, I like Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz playing the Washington Wizards, who have the 3rd worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing centers. Rudy Gobert has averaged 40.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with an 18% usage rate. He scored 40, 77, and 47 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 33, 32, and 32 minutes. He's projected at 43.1 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He's $8,700 FanDuel salary, but he's $500 less on DraftKings. So I love that DraftKings price. And he scored 38, 47, 47, and 43 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Wizards. So good player versus team history, fast-paced game, and a great matchup. So I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Washington Wizards. Okay, and if you're looking for a stud at the center position, I like Karl Anthony Towns from the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Phoenix Suns, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing centers. Karl Anthony Towns has averaged 45.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 28% usage rate. He scored 52, 34, and 59 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 40, and 33 minutes. He's projected at 45.9 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can get you 48 fantasy points, get you 5 times value or more. He's $9,700 FanDuel salary, and he's $300 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. And he scored 39, 58, 55, 64, and 61 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Suns. So that's the main reason I like this stud pick here. Excellent player versus team history. He's got his price on DraftKings looks a little bit low for his upside. And we know Vegas thinks there's going to be 229.5 points scored in this game. So we got a high-scoring game. So I like Karl Anthony Towns here versus the Phoenix Suns.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.